Okay. Also. Gut. 118 versus ca. 6000. Darunter sind ca. 300 Terror, Antifa und Black Lives Matters, sagt FBI. Plus im Kapitol der Cop, der aufmacht mit den Protokollen of Zion in seinem Spind. Somit ist die zionistische Antifa im Einklang mit Code 666 Burn Down West. Tja, Bilderstürmer, Antifa.
18 of those present are officers, meaning they are outnumbered more than 28 to 1.
They had bats, sticks, sledgehammers, 50-pound fire extinguishers, table legs. They were breaking all pieces of the infrastructure to use against us.
Between 1:50 and 1:59, Jock announces that Capitol Police are preparing to pull back M4 officers, a designation that refers to officers armed with M4 semi-automatic rifles.
And Jack Cruiser 50, be advised that Capitol Police is going to start moving their resources inside. They're going to start the M4 officers first.
A small group of Capitol Police officers is positioned at the top of the stairs under the scaffolding. Through 3D analysis, the Post calculated that rioters, some of them armed, are about 200 feet away from a window entrance. At 2:03 p.m., a Capitol Police supervisor orders officers to leave their positions near the stairs. At least 22 officers from Unit 42, seen here, are still making their way toward the inaugural platform. At 3 p.m., a Capitol Police supervisor orders officers to leave their positions near the stairs.
Du Würstchen.
At least 22 officers from Unit 42, seen here, are still making their way toward the inaugural platform, more than 20 minutes after Glover's initial call for support. As rioters overwhelm police, a high-level MPD official with the call sign 5 tells Glover to pull back resources.
You need to pull back your resources. If you need to go inside or pull back, if they're getting behind you, you don't have enough resources. If I get this up, they're going to have to rent access. At least it's not what we can defend. We gotta have what we have.
Oh, fuck off, Alter. Also erst Rückzug, ne? Dann sagt der andere, no, wir halten die Stellung bis zum letzten Mann. Aber dann geht das Pfefferspray aus. Oh.
Rioters overtake the scaffolding and run up the stairs.
Riders overtake the Treppe. Und dann stürmt der Mob
to reach a small line of police officers blocking doors to the building. They quickly overrun the officers. Around 40 feet below, another group of rioters pushes over a light pole, which falls into the police line.
Echtes Polizisten von Lampe erschlagen. Dann machen wir es mal einfach. 14:09 Uhr. Tödliche Lampe fällt auf 10 Cops. Drama.
The Post used a tool developed by researchers at Carnegie Mellon University to estimate.
Gut, Carnegie Mellon University. Sehr gerne nehmen wir das mit. Wenn die Experten sich sogar selber nennen für ihre Verbrechen.
University to estimate the size and density of the mob at key moments.
Die Größe und Dichte des Mobs.
By researchers at Carnegie Mellon University to estimate the size and density of the mob at key moments. The results of that analysis were used to approximate rioters' locations for the 3D visualization. The analysis shows that by this time, at 2000.
Gut, also die Key Moments. 2000 get in KAPITOL und sie kämpften gegen 118 Cops. Legendäre Schlacht.
People have pushed past police lines on the east side of the Capitol and attempt to break in.
Oh, jetzt an der East Side. Kriegen wir uns noch die West-Freunde, jetzt sind wir hier an der East-Front. Okay, jetzt kommen wir von hinten quasi rein. East-Front. Überraschungsangriff. Spannend, denn das ist jetzt 14:13 Uhr. Einfach durchs Fenster, dort wo keine Cops sind, unbemerkt hinten rein. Das kann nur die Antifa sein. 14:13 Uhr. Schreibst du das jetzt? Broken Window. So, also nochmal Nord, Süd, West und Ost. Angriff Nummer 2 kam von hier. Angriff Nummer 1 kam von hier und von hier sammelt es sich dann hier bei Norden, stößt dann hier vor. Das ist Schlaglinie 1, Ablenkung für die Cops. Ablenkung und Konzentrieren der Resource der Cops, um dann von hinten, wie sie halt immer so sind, ne, von hinten vorzustoßen, unbemerkt. Broke Window. Get in. No cops. No cameras. Na, so blöd. Wir gucken mal weiter.
Requesting additional resources on the east side as they broke into that window and they're trying to kick it in. Within 13 hours, Capitol's been breached on the east side.
The Capitol police officers detain a rioter who smashed a window. According to court documents, the officers seek guidance over the radio, but cannot be clearly heard or are unable to broadcast their message. They release him. Around the same time, rioters who ran up the stairs and pushed past officers break a window on the west side of the Capitol. Over the next 12 minutes, Glover is heard seeking guidance on a fallback point.
Cool, also sind hier drüben am Fenster. Die konnten aber nie hier hoch, also mussten sie hier, also können sie es hier nicht sein. Also tippe ich mal, die sind von hier drüben kommen und brechen dann hier rein. Also von hinten rangeschlüpfert. Wie schreibst du das jetzt am besten? Ich mache einfach ein Foto. Ganz einfach.
4 times. No response on where to fall back is provided from Capitol Police over the radio.
I need a command official from Capitol so we can coordinate where they want us to put back to. We cannot hold this without more munitions or more manpower. Well, Capitol's working on munitions right now.
We stayed on that mid-terrace as long as we could safely. A decision was made by the United States Capitol Police to pull their personnel back inside the building at a point, leaving one of my flanks pretty weak.
Wir haben die Flanke. Commander Robert Clover. Okay.
At least 9,400 people are visible in footage taken during this time period and outnumbered officers more than 58 to 1, according to an analysis by the Post and Carnegie Mellon University. At around the same time, rioters entered the Capitol on the east side.
They breached the Senate door on the east side of the building as well.
Ooh, we lost the line. Was? Reinforced at least 16 times and only at least 7 times. Oh. 16 Mal hat er um Verstärkung gerufen. 7 Mal um neue Munition. Heldenhaft hat er gekämpft. Wie schreibt man das? Der MPD. Clover. Call 16 times. Reinforcement und 7 Mal Munition.
Rioters flood into the Capitol from at least 2 entry points.
Es ist ein Gangbang.
The remaining Capitol and MPD officers are surrounded and outnumbered.
Whoa, what the fuck? They broke through the top!
Chief Son was pleading for the deployment of the National Guard. And in response to that, there was not an immediate yes. The National Guard is responding. Yes, the National Guard is on the way.
Pentagon officials denied that their response was delayed, saying DC Guard took 3 hours to arrive because they had not been asked in advance to provide.
OMG. 17 Mal hat er um Hilfe gerufen. Am Ende. 17 Mal. Das ist wichtig. 17 times backup call in 78 Minuten. Das nennen die schon Krieg?
Backup to Capitol Police. At 2:28 p.m., a rioter in a blue sweatshirt breaks through the police line.
Alter, die sind doch sehr dumm. Die sind einfach dumm. Na, schreib was mit auf. 14 Uhr 28. Einer bricht durch, bleibt stehen und feiert sich. So.
The crowd follows.
Ja, der weiß gar nicht, was er machen soll.
It's over!
So. Immer noch 14:20 Uhr. It's over. Es würde in Deutschland niemals sorgen im Krieg. Der Russe auch nicht. Aber ja, naja.
You better run, cops! You better fucking run!
As the crowd advances, the number of officers visible in this video is approximately 85.
Gut, jetzt waren es am Ende bloß noch 58 Cops. 58 Cops versus ca. 9000. Gut. Mensch du, die Antifa hat schon eine ganz gute Kampfquote. Gegen 58 Cops mit 300 Mann und 9000 Leute zum Verstecken drin. Naja.
See how fast the cops turn around once they fucking saw the numbers game.
Glover declares an emergency, referred to as a 1033.
We lost the line. We lost the line. OMPD, pull back. OMPD, pull back up to the upper deck. OMPD, pull back to the upper deck. ASAP. OMPD, come back to the upper deck. Upper deck.
Drama, Drama, Drama.
1033.
Oh, Flanke 10:30. Was auch immer das bedeutet. 10:33. 14:13 ging es los und 10:33, repeat 10:33, west front of the Capitol. We've been flanked and have been lost the line. Wir wurden flankiert und gefickt von der Seite rein. 10, wieso sagt er 10:33? Meinte nicht 14:33 bestimmt, oder? 14:33 Uhr. Westfront. Flankiert. Plus lost the line. Das sind solche Pussys.
1033 west front of the Capitol. We've been flanked and we've lost the line.
Jetzt schlappert die Heule.
We literally fought all the way back to those stairwells, and I mean, it took us a long time. You had to walk backwards, and you're engaging with these individuals.
Glover again calls for reinforcements.
There's a 50, still need reinforcements, upper deck, west front, upper deck, west front, we cannot lose the upper deck.
Gut. Wir dürfen die letzte Frontlinie. Ich dachte, die haben sie unten gerade schon. Oh, so eine Drama-Bitch. We cannot lose the upper deck. We cannot lose the upper deck. Wetten, sie verlieren es noch.
1033, have all units respond to assistance. Do what we trained to do.
So, dafür wurdet ihr trainiert. Dafür wurdet ihr trainiert. Ernstfall. No, Ernst ist jetzt 18 und will Taschengeld. Wisst.
MPD officers were forced off the upper deck by 2:40 p.m., roughly an hour and a half after Glover and his officers arrived on the scene. Rioters flooded into the Capitol building. Capitol Police did not clear Congress to resume its work until 7:30 p.m. 5 people died, including a Capitol Police officer, and 140 officers were in.
Was? Bis 19. Nochmal zurück.
Including a Capitol Police officer. Rioters flooded into the Capitol building. Capitol Police did not clear Congress to resume its.
So, bis 19:30 Uhr. Congress clear. Und flood into the mob.
Work until 7:30 p.m. 5 people died, including a Capitol Police officer, and 140 officers were injured.
Okay. Gut. Dann könnten wir doch mal einen spontanen raushauen. So. 17 mal rief MPD Commander Cleaver um Hilfe am 6.1.21. The darkest hour. Good. Next.
Another thing I would say, Lester, is, as we try to figure out, well, it looks now like the Capitol, the police.
Yeah, Pete, let me break away from you a second, because things are happening very quickly.
The government did this to us. We were normal, good, law-abiding citizens.
They no longer have been able to keep them back.
This is our contract.
Finde ich ja geil, wenn sie schon was CNBC, Bigger Picture. Da bin ich mal gespannt.
Right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Um 12 hat Trump gesagt, wir laufen jetzt zum Kapitol. Schuldig.
President Trump airing his grievances in front of his supporters at a rally nearby, and he was warning vengeance for Republicans who did not take his side in objecting to these results. On Capitol, a joint session of Congress has broken into House and Senate chambers as they debate objections that arose from GOP lawmakers over the electoral results from Arizona. On Capitol Hill, a joint session of Congress has broken into House and Senate chambers as they debate.
Cool. Während sie debattiert haben, um 13 Uhr ist irgendwer irgendwo eingebrochen. Broke into office.
Objections that arose from GOP lawmakers over the electoral results from Arizona.
Die Arizona Vote Ergebnisse spontan gestohlen. Ja, das wohl gewesen sein könnte.
There's some protests happening down outside the Capitol. They appear to be Trump supporters who are frustrated with the outcome and are trying to breach some of that those security perimeters around the Capitol.
USA! USA! And we'll stand in recess until the call of the chair.
Boss. We have visual evidence that some protesters have made it inside the Capitol building, around the security, and are gathering around the area where the Senate was in session.
We were just told that there has been
the Capitol.
Gas man.
Of the legislature were informed that they should don their gas mask.
Gas masks that are under our seats.
Senators have been evacuated.
There are gunshots inside the Capitol.
I think it's the most shocking failure of security imaginable to place the Congress of the United States at physical risk
So, Security-Problem. Schockierendes. US Army sagt. US Army sagt. Schock. Security Risk. Für alle. For Senat.
In an occupied congressional chamber because they weren't prepared to deal with it.
Und Occupy Chamber.
There's a disturbing image at this moment of Capitol Hill police bringing out a victim who is bloodied from the Capitol.
It's a heartbreaking day, and it needs to stop, and the president needs to be the first to help make it stop.
What the hell was law enforcement on Capitol Hill thinking by not having secured the Capitol today?
From the president, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful.
First of all, are you and your colleagues safe right now?
Yeah, everybody's safe. I don't want to give my location, but I'll tell you this is madness, and anybody that calls themselves a Republican like myself should be very ashamed right now.
Right over here, you can actually see right here, this is a caravan of vehicles from the Metropolitan Police Department. So this is not Capitol Police, this is not National Guard, this is District of Columbia Police. They came in their riot gear and entered the Capitol. We have seen others from the National Guard and
Warum kommen aus Washington in den Stadtteil DC Polizisten? Haben die denn in DC keine eigenen Cops? Nur für diesen Stadtstaat? Weil DC war ja damals noch Stadtstaat. Wieso kommen auswärtige Cops? Washington Cops came to DC Inc. Vielleicht weiß das ja irgendeiner von euch. Achso, 33 ist ein Polizeicode. Okay, dann schreiben wir das halt auch. Hier oben hat man es. 33 Cop Code. Emergency All Units. Quasi SOS für Pussys.
Other law enforcement agencies, and then in just the last few minutes, we also have seen some snipers.
We are hours into a siege on the Capitol building of the United States of America, and we have not seen the President of the United States.
Look, I can think of no greater failure by a commander-in-chief than to allow this kind of disturbance to continue and not stop it.
Stormed the Capitol building. They are marching through now.
An improvised explosive device has been found at the Capitol. It did not detonate. The federal agents have it, and it has not harmed anyone. An explosive device has been located at the headquarters of the Republican National Committee. That explosive device was real, was detonated by a bomb squad, harmed no one.
This has really been pouring gasoline on a fire, and we need to push back on this, not only on the rhetoric, but also on those extremist groups that are capitalizing on it.
I call on this mob to pull back and allow the work of democracy to go forward. I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege.
Quasi, jetzt soll er selber dafür kämpfen, damit sein Sieg von beiden, der gestohlen war, erhält. Wenn er es nie macht, ist Trump der Böse. Wenn er es macht, verliert er. Tja, Biden ist eine Bitch.
What happened today is unprecedented in American history. And when you have violent mobs storming the floor of the House of Representatives and the floor of the United States Senate, and the president's response is to say that he loves those people, it is absolutely counter to the Constitution and counter to the peaceful transition of power and the values on which this republic was built.
And this was much bigger than the individuals, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It was way bigger than that. This was about democracy and our Constitution versus anarchy. We need to stay in session. We need to fulfill our constitutional duty and finish this process and ensure the 306 electoral votes for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are certified.
The Capitol building has been cleared. Now they're working to clear the Capitol grounds. Associated Press now reporting and NBC News reporting that the police have used tear gas and percussion grenades to begin clearing protesters from the U.S. Capitol.
But at this time, something went wrong. I admit that. If I was up there, I deserve to be fired.
There was a shooting at the Capitol today, and that in fact the shooting victim has died.
I guess you can call it historical. I would call it disgusting, unacceptable, inexcusable.
This man, Trump, is simply unfit to serve as president, to serve as the commander-in-chief.
The account of Donald Trump will be locked for 12 hours following the removal of the tweets that Twitter deemed incite violence. If the tweets are not removed, the account will remain locked.
The United States Senate will not. The United States.
Ja, gut. Sehen wir doch mal nach. Lehrerplatz plus Lehrerplatz plus Lehrerplatz. Ist das normal bei der Abstimmung, dass hier keiner da ist?
The United States Senate will not be intimidated. We will not be kept out of this chamber by thugs, mobs, or threats.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Joseph R. Biden, Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 306 votes. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 232 votes. The votes for Vice President of the United States are as follows. Kamala D. Harris of the state of California has received...
Without the court's permission, Chansley's lawyer claimed believes back his assertion in court papers.
Gut, ich glaube, da haben wir das durch. Und da können wir jetzt wieder hier weitermachen. Wo war es denn? Das Internet ist so arschlangweilig. Langsam, es geht gar nicht dran. Das Bild brauchen wir noch mit der Betty Ross Flagge hinten drauf und
Levine, former Richard Levine, was appointed the Assistant
Secretary of Health. This is so this is very historic, from what I understand. He's very qualified. He thinks he's a she. So I don't know if he will be in charge of mental health. But I guess that's an important message. Apparently, pretending you're a woman and transitioning, mutilating yourself, and taking all the toxic hormone treatments is healthy. So, good advice. And he did such a bang-up job in Pennsylvania with COVID that he had to be promoted.
I wonder about that. I mean, you wonder if Levine is an actual transsexual, or if she. Now, as you know, there's particular reasons for these things. They're not to prevent the spread of disease. They're to keep the doctor from drooling into an open wound, typically. Yeah. But here's the thing that I always find amusing is that if you have to sneeze and you're during a surgery, do you know what your training is with the mask? You're to put the mask directly into the patient because the sneeze will blow out the sides more than it goes straight out.
Yes. So
the idea that the mask has some sort of, ultimate reductive properties in terms of viral load is just, it's just preposterous. It's the whole COVID thing. I mean, how many times have we gone through it?
Well, it's this nurturing this obsessive compulsive fear of germs. It's just completely unscientific. It's just irrational. It's impractical. It's again, part of this thing is that somehow you can hide away from life in the attempt to preserve life. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think Biden is really going to use the COVID fear as the basis for a medical dictatorship. He'll be creeping toward that every single day of his administration, and they'll be, trying to frighten people on one side and then use the intimidation of the fearful against the ones who are clear-minded to see if they can just keep beating them down until everyone is wearing a mask all the time.
He also called for state and county leaders to implement mandatory mask laws.
Just that it's beyond just cruelty. It's almost sort of psychopathic, that that they would celebrate the moment in that way. It's just amazing, that the public puts up with it. But hopefully, Tim, people are getting angry, and this will lead to a clearer understanding of the world. It's going to be an angry crowd that visits Washington, D.C. this week on the 6th, won't it?
Yeah, there's. I think Trump has rallied, his troops to come and descend upon Washington, D.C. for this January 6th event. This is usually a routine and formal event, as a formality, as the Biden campaign called it. But this year's different because of the election. The questions surrounding the election of fraud. Ordinarily December 14th, I guess that's the safe harbor date when the Electoral College are sent to sealed. They're voted on in the respective states, and they're sent to Washington, D.C., supposedly in a sealed box or something. I'm not supposed to know what the results are, these things. But we do. And, of course, the 6 or 7 states in question saw to it to accept these, quote, certified votes, even though the elections were failed or fraudulent, and that's not even a dispute. That's one of the facts that at least in 5 of these states failed to meet federal and also state law. Yet they certified the vote, not coupled with the allegations. I think substantive allegations of fraud in these states. They certified these votes, and they were sent to, so they were sent on December 14th. So January 6th is when Congress, the new Congress, the vice president, sitting vice president, opens the sealed ballots and introduces the votes. And that's when the president, person who is supposedly elected president in November, becomes president-elect officially. This year, there's a lot more question. People are calling upon Pence to intercede and not count the votes from these 7 states because of the fraudulent nature of these elections. They're failed elections. The law says the president, vice president, as president of the Senate, shall read. Given the controversy and the problems in these states, there's a question whether these things constitute legal votes. And the argument is that the vice president, has the discretion not to count them, in which case he would subtract those electoral votes from the tally, and that would give Donald Trump, the sitting president, the majority in that election, and he would then be elected president. That's the argument for intercession. It's the Pence card, for Pence's intercession. Another path is the challenge, and there are as many 24 Republican representatives in the House of Representatives who are willing to challenge the vote, and at least one senator, I think Josh Hawley, has said he will do it. So you have a senator and several congressmen challenging the Electoral College vote, which then forces the Congress to break off into debate if this occurs. And at least a 2-hour debate, some saying for each challenge it's 2 hours debate, or is it 2 hour debate? That's unclear to me. I imagine if you had like 100, you'd think maybe as many as 140 members of the House of Representatives would challenge it, because they're the ones that actually signed, I think, signed an amicus brief in support of the Texas case a few weeks ago. So that might create what is called a contingent election. I'll stand corrected if I'm not a constitutional scholar, but this is how I think how it works. It becomes a contingent election, and the 2 houses, break off, the Senate and House of Representatives, to a debate. And of course, the Senate being Republican controlled and House of Representatives being narrowly Democratic controlled, both are narrow, by the way. There's some speculation, of course, that the Senate would vote for the vice president to be Pence, and the House of Representatives would vote for, of course, Joseph Biden. And then that's not an election, so then it would technically become a contingent election. And that's when the House of Representatives votes, and it's by the delegation, not by representation, and Republicans have a 30-20 lead, and so you could see Trump winning that way. You can see how that could go that way. The problem is we have a lot of rhinos Republicans, right? I mean, a lot of weak Republicans, Mitch McConnell, Roy Blunt, a lot of senators said, no, it's over. Trump shouldn't do this. Yet you have these a lot of Republicans, not just in the House, but in the Senate, saying, no, this isn't, they're going to challenge it. Mitch McConnell doesn't seem to have control, although he's the majority leader. And so it's hard to say how this will go. My feeling is I said this before, really the Republicans, if they really wanted to win this, they have the power, they have the numbers, they have the facts, they have the moral and political high ground in this. They could win it. So if they don't do it, if it said, here you go, the Supreme Court, supposedly conservative majority, the Senate, Republican, all the legislatures in dispute states, I think the critical 4 in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, are Republican controlled. So, but all these institutions have failed to hold the Democrats accountable for their obvious electoral fraud. And so if Joe Biden does prevail in stealing this election, Republicans are known, but the Republicans to blame in this. The Democrats, in a sense, stole this fair and square,
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourselves, why are they letting this happen? And is this just a charade? So that's where we are right now.
Yep, that's where we are. And incidentally, a very concise and clear explanation of the process, which is very unclear constitutionally. They've never really gone this far down the process as you describe, and there could be procedural issues at almost every step. I know that there's rumors that Pelosi and McConnell have already worked out a process by which they can basically thwart the vote from coming.
Also haben wir am 6.1.21 den New Senat plus den College Vote. was dann dazu führt, dass am 20.01.21 13 Min zu Zeitig Biden ins Amt. Aber mit dem Sturm aufs Kapitol aktivieren sich gleichzeitig noch 1000 Puzzle, was dazu führt, dass die komplette Army plus Navy ausrückt und es sofort ein Act of War in einem VEIKKO-Prozess ist und da alle All-In waren, sind jetzt alle tot. Ganz einfach.
Forward, though I don't quite know how they could do that given the Constitution, but nevertheless, these are the rumors. I tell you the truth, Tim, I am worried about this. I really don't think that there is much hope for a Trump presidency here. I think that if that was going to happen, the Republicans should have already been courageous. They could have already forced the states that had these Tammany Hall type election results with the obvious ballot stuffing. I don't know if you saw just to digress, but last week they were able to get some, and I think it was in at the Democratic legislature, they were able to get some of the evidence on record, and they showed that there was 17,650 votes that were literally switched from Trump to Biden, and they show how they did it. They had all the data. The people who are bringing the evidence forward are just without question experts in this area, and there was no contestation by the Democrats. I mean, there wasn't like they were saying, well, wait a second, we have this other rationale to explain it. It was as if it didn't matter, basically. So you've had Lindsey Graham say that, well, it's fine to protest, but you really can't change the results of another state's election. So the rhinos are already making their position clear, and they have already for the last 2 months.
It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's something like the courts. When the courts had these procedural rulings to ignore lawsuits, they're not challenging the facts of these cases. Now you're dealing with the reality of these stolen, fraudulent elections. And this is the whole argument. Where the law says the vice president shall read the votes. Well, they're not votes if they're fraudulent.
Well, it hinges on the term vote.
Yeah.
What is a vote?
Is a fraudulent vote a vote?
Right. And he can certainly coherently, logically, and obviously within the broad interpretation of the Constitution, just say these aren't votes. We've just presented really good evidence that it was fraud. So anyway, we're not going to count them. This I just think is a very, very far-fetched idea. I think that if they were going to do that, Pence would have, it wouldn't just be in this debate, which you don't really have any clear way of understanding how it's going to impact the public. They have either a 2 or 4 hour, like you say, I'm not sure they even know at this point of how long the evidence can be presented for. But in any event, this would be such a cold cock at this point that I'm not sure what evidence they could bring forward.
Well, here's the case. The president has made these accusations, I think, with evidence, despite the media's blackout. More than half the country thinks the election was stolen.
Yeah.
So the president, being a co-equal branch of government, the executive branch, he is a constitutional officer. His sworn duty is to uphold and defend the Constitution, also faithfully enforce the laws. So if he has evidence of fraud, he has to enforce the laws and have his government investigate the evidence, arrest the offenders, and of course the offenders go all the way up to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, because they have him on tape admitting that they have a vast, inclusive voter fraud operation.
Yeah, right. That's the
and so I mean,
filters.
the point is if
senile or not great.
That's true, but I'm saying people have been prosecuted like on the social media material saying, I plan to do this, and that's introduced in the court against defendants as evidence of conspiracy or participation, whatever crime the person's been charged with. The young man who got caught up in that Charlottesville thing where he allegedly drove his car into the crowd. Seems to be he was being chased and he panicked, but that's a whole other story. And he's got 140 years in prison. But part of the evidence brought against him was some of his social media and his showing his temperament. So I mean, theoretically, the president could charge the Joe Biden, with being involved in this crime. Not to mention the problem. Here's the discomfort is we have this political system where there's two major political parties, two legit political parties officially. Okay, we don't really brook or tolerate third parties much in this country. They're not considered serious. If one of the major parties is shown to be a criminal enterprise, what we have is a constitutional crisis brought about by criminal activity. And we have an argument now. So now the Republicans, the losers, the designated losers in this, and they've designated themselves the losers because that's all part of the the show we call politics. Is they have to follow all the technical, they have to follow the letter of the law. Make sure every T is crossed, every I is dotted. Because you can't break any rules. So we're told that all up to this point, all these laws can be broken. All these electoral laws regarding elections can be broken, all up to the point of the Electoral College are counted on January 6th. And then after that, then we have to follow the law specific, technically.
Yeah.
But if you've broken all the laws leading up to this point, why should they be constrained by your reading of the law when there's actually ambiguity in the law? Because we're dealing with a constitutional crisis. There's no way any constitutional system can deal effectively with law breaking in bad faith because it relies on people kind of following the rules, the basic rules of the game. They haven't.
Yeah.
Ansatz, ne? Wie kann man bis zum 20. lawless bis zum 20.01.21 und ab diesem Zeitpunkt no investigation plus law vor Trump. Also die Gegenseite, Deepstate, sind die Gesetzlosen und Trump muss sich ans Recht halten. Warum? Optik. Ne? Optik ist wichtig.
So now it gets political. It gets political. When it gets political, you have to be a little creative. You have to assert your powers. And this is the point where, constitutional order breaks down and you kind of edge towards perhaps a civil war disorder, and it becomes basically a question of power and will. And that's what politics is, despite all the legal niceties that Americans are told that our system has, all the constitutional parchment guarantees we have. Obviously they're empty promises, as we can see.
Well, it is power, will, but it is also propaganda, unfortunately. And what I'm worried about is that we are in the process of a theatrical propaganda moment. Trump has called his legions into Washington. And I think you're going to have millions there. I've heard that this is believed to be the case. There'll be several million people.
Will they cross the Rubicon, the Potomac River?
Yeah, crossing the Rubicon.
The die is cast, as they say.
Right. And now, if this is all, a theatrical production, what is the purpose of it? Okay, well, let me just, my thoughts along these lines are that the target
reflect back on 2020, all the events.
Yeah, exactly. Is that it's all been leading up to a slave state. The basic target of the Biden ANTIFA political movement is to reduce the social status and self-esteem of particularly the white male, but the white race, the European race in general, races in general. And so if what we're about to see on the 6th is part of that, one scenario would be a false flag. You have people in the crowd, who are operatives who use violence in a way that can then be brought to the public and saying, look, the militant groups, these dangerous white males with ARs, they've got to be rounded up and disarmed. I mean, here they tried to kill the president or whatever the false flag would be. But that is kind of what I am worried about, is that you have, if what happens is, as I think, is that you'll have the evidence presented and it will be public. There'll be a way to get the information directly out to the crowd. It'll be outside, millions milling about, and it'll be overwhelming. They'll just say, it's just very clear as a day. Trump had the election stolen, but then they will procedurally find a way to circumvent, and of course the rhinos being what they are, that shouldn't be too much trouble. They'll be able to have the votes cast for Biden. And now what does the crowd do at that point? What are they supposed to do in this pageant? Well, I mean, one scenario is French Revolution, where they storm the Bastille. Mm-hmm. And if you have operatives in the midst who are there for the purpose of creating the kind of violence that could then be used as propaganda, now you'd have the double whammy of a illegitimate Antifa taking the knee Biden presidency, starting at exactly the moment where you've had this rationale for the disarming and the lowering of the social status of the European male. That looks like a very possible scenario that all of these events would be logical relating to.
Yeah, and you have a very volatile situation potentially in Washington D.C. That again, it also could be a situation where, the challengers are made the chair debate, because the Senate is, although it's Republican controlled, it's full of a bunch of wimpy, typical Washington, swamp creatures, and they'll go for Biden. House members go for Biden, and Pence will read in the votes, and that's it. Be a big letdown.
Yeah, well, it'll be a psychological disaster because
yes,
you've had an obviously stolen election, so democracy doesn't work.
Yep.
And then you have been exposed as irrationally violent. So then the weapons that the Europeans have would be, on the chopping block.
But then there's this whole thing. No, the DNI is supposed to come out with this report that was delayed. Now, what if this report comes out after the 6th, and it does point to foreign intervention in the elections, as they say, and corruption? Then you have 14 days for the president to act.
Right. I mean, this could well go right up to the inauguration, because Trump has between now and then to declare martial law or use the Insurrection Act to suspend legal process and just say, I'm not permitting Biden to take office. There'll be no inauguration because the evidence that, this is not just a criminal, it's not just Tammany Hall, but it's an international attack, and as president, so Trump has
not take office mit Insurrection Act by international attack by all gangsters und Senat plus Biden handeln nicht. Somit wäre die 1 Wahlhack, die 2 wäre Cyberhack, die 3 wäre der Sturm und 3-mal nicht reagiert wäre dann Insurrection Act von 1815, was dann automatisch zu Showtime führt, was dann zur Castle Rock und Hologramm Biden führt, was dann zu MAGA führt. Naja. Wir haben es gleich geschafft.
Options all the way up until he leaves office.
And I mean, that's not completely cynical. I think there's a legitimate case to be made for that.
Of course. I mean, if Trump was real, if he wasn't just a, an actor playing a role here, he would be required to do this. As you well know, Tim, we've discussed this 100 times, that you cannot present clear evidence that there was election fraud as president of the United States and then not take the next step, which is to suspend the results of the election. I mean, it's just, it's axiomatic. You have to do that.
And the people at fault for this, you can say, well, then Trump is acting like a dictator, he's being opportunistic. Well, okay, but then again, you shouldn't have tried to steal the election.
Right. Well, no, I mean, I think that the left would riot.
Der entscheidende Punkt. Ne? Let the steal happen or act like a dictator. Mit automatischen Antifa-Unruhen, was dann zu Civil War führt. Andersrum führt es auch zu Civil War. Die einzige Lösung sind 100 Tage PSYOP. Codename ja, Krake. So, wenn sie es geschehen lassen, Bürgerkrieg, wenn sie es wie ein Diktator machen, ist Bürgerkrieg. Und ja, mitgespielt hat die Lodge, der Papst, die Krone sowie die BIS und die Wall Street und die City of London sowie die Fed und die NATO mit den Geheimdiensten plus den Bloodlines und die Zionisten plus die Illuminaten und am Ende boom. So.
But I think that Trump's base would support him right to the max on this. I just think this is very far-fetched. I had a thought that I'll pass along. It's cynical, but it's I thought it might create context. I think if they really want to create the big frenzy in the Trump's brigade that is milling about outside the Capitol buildings, when they
Eilmeldung. Marilyn Manson, der sich seine Rippen entfernen lassen hat, um sich besser einzulutschen, hat bei seiner Vergewaltigung immer Nazi-Outfit mit Nazi-Waffen getragen, da er gerne als der Führer vergewaltigte. Sagt jedenfalls die Jerusalem Post. Marilyn Manson, der Nazi-Vergewaltiger. Ja. Wer weiß, aus welchem Loch der gestochen ist.
Get their chance to present the evidence, they should bring the star witness forward, Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes. Bring him out of exile.
Right. They have him, in the wings. He's been under, some kind of house protection. They bring him out, and then he just drops the truth bomb of pedophilia, names, but this doesn't stop the process, and Biden still becomes president. Well, now, because so many times in history, you see the violence is what they want.
Mm-hmm.
The violence is how all of the kind of political machinations are maneuvered to produce. They are producing a rationale for violence because now they can reduce population. Now they can enslave population. this becomes the rationale with which is the tool that they can use for their next step.
What we're seeing is sort of the end stages of the color revolution that was started, I think, overtly in the early stages of 2020 with the declared pandemic, the shutdown. Something that the Trump administration was participated in. That's something that people forget is he did declare the state of emergency and permitted the governors to carry down their orders.
Yeah. So I would just say as advice, I would make sure that if you're there, I know people are going, record everything. Record everything. Particularly anyone who is, kind of inappropriately violent, get that on tape. That will need to be out immediately to explain to America what actually happened, to counter what mainstream media will be presenting about the operation. The problem is that we are not ready for violence because we haven't gone through the information revolution. The people don't know what to attack. I mean, they think that they can attack, Biden and Harris and the ANTIFA crowd, and this will somehow save the country. But they don't understand the extent that the Republicans are part of the problem. And that the oligarchs, the Jewish banking families, the medical dictatorship, they need to, the public needs to have that information. So the information revolution first, so that if you move into a violent phase, you know what and who to attack, because right now they don't. Right now it'll just be violence, which will be very, very easy to manipulate in terms of propaganda.
Well, a good example of that is dealing with the larger issue. The meta-political issue is, of course, the impact of the various lockdowns, the economic destruction that it has wrought, but the failure of the political process or our political leaders to deal with that issue. In fact, they're passing relief bills and handing out checks with borrowed money. At the same time, they're carrying out policies that are just destroying what remains of the Main Street economy, and it's just all part of this global sort of carpetbagging operation. It's a big mass transfer of wealth occurred in the past 11 months under the guise of the pandemic, and no one's addressing that. There's no political representative, no political figure of any stature that's dealing with that issue, which again highlights the bankruptcy, or at least the uselessness of the political class. In fact, they're actually making it worse because again they're just running up the debt, as if it doesn't matter. And their solution is paying people not to work and not allowing people to work, at least not going after the governors that are spearheading the economic warfare that's being waged.
Well, the problem, of course, is the process we're on now is national suicide, in that the so-called helicopter money, this direct insertion of $2,000 for every citizen. Tim, that can't ever stop.
Well, that's getting everyone conditioned for universal basic income and.
Well, but moreover, it's getting everyone in position for the end of the dollar, because if you start having a payroll for non-work of $1 trillion a month, I mean, that isn't going to last very long as the world's reserve currency. So, the process we're on will be to have the currency stop working. You'll see it, first of all, the most important signal will be it stops working against food and energy, but food particularly. If it stops working in terms of being able to purchase foreign grain, things like this, man, oh man, this is a sign that you're close to the end, because that will really create the not just inflation, but the rejection of the currency, just en masse. And so now if you
Der erste Ministerpräsident ruft auf, dass alle Polizisten doch einfach mal ihren Dienst verweigern sollen. Im pädophilen Komplex von inbegriffen sind. Es baut sich langsam Spannung auf.
Situation where American currency in terms of international food and even inside the country, how will we get along not too well because we are not we're not a farming nation anymore. You know, we don't know how to produce food. The inner cities are you know, obviously struggling with fentanyl problems. I mean, so we are at a very debased place culturally as a country, and I don't think we can go through any kind of you know, real test of character. I think it'll just explode into violence again. This will all be very easy to be manipulated.
Well, here's the important thing: the House of Representatives is on top of this because apparently the next Congress, the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives, is moving to remove all gender-specific terminology and language, so they're all inclusive to all genders.
Right. Well, I mean, the cultural Marxists have simply won. And like Gregor Luchas's idea of turning the European children from humans into animals will finally be successful, and then on to, as his ultimate objective was
Finanzamt in Kassel abgebrannt. Mensch, du. Vor 5 Stunden brannte das Finanzamt. Mensch, du. Naja.
Vegetables and plants. You know, I mean, they'll just lose their humanity, and even their bestiality will be gone. You know, because they really won't be sentient. I mean, what I would imagine is just en masse fentanyl, and you know, we'll just be a drug nation on our way into the grave. The countering all of these negative thoughts is the fact that you know, the information revolution is really picking up speed. I was delighted to see, in fact, the thing that really I'm most pleased about this last week was that now 50% of hospital staff, according to polls, are saying they will not take the vaccine, even though they're at risk of losing their job. So this is a tremendous achievement of the independent media, and it really shows that people are ready for to be outside of the propaganda control.
Well, this whole thing and this, I mean, even if you buy into the vaccine paradigm, the idea behind vaccines in general, they're trying to roll this thing out where they're trying to tell you, reassure you that it's safe, it's effective, even though they admit that it's not. But nevertheless, they've able to expedite, all the tests. Usually something that takes 7 to 10 years. They've done it in 6-7 months, and then they're telling you to take this for a disease, which is 99.97%, recovery.
So auf den Sack. Ich wollte ab dem 4., 5., 17 Tage am Stück saufen. Jetzt ist aber seit dem 1. bis zum 17. 7 Tage super Lockdown und danach um 17 Uhr am 17.05. dann ist scheinbar irgendwie alles vorbei. Na toll. Herr Kurz scheißt auf die Grundrechte. Legal, egal. Ja, normal.
Right, you don't survive it. Most people are asymptomatic or mild symptoms. It's a flu, for Pete's sake, and people just aren't buying it. And not to mention when it's an mRNA vaccine. It's not even a vaccine. It's gene therapy. It's gene modification for what? It may do this. It may do that. And I think I'll just risk it. I think I'll risk catching a cold. And it's just they're just not selling it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that if you're getting the poll numbers of 50% of hospital staff, it's a far greater fraction than that. I think these numbers are controlled, so I would be, I hope it's up to like the 80% are just refusing. You cannot have a sense that the COVID was not real in any way and then accept the vaccine. In other words, to me, just understanding some simple facts like the PCR cycle that was used to create the case demic was set 40, and that this is guaranteed to produce, just 97% false positive. And knowing that this was permitted, and understood by the government, I mean, that in and of itself should just give the public the awareness that this is artificial, and that therefore the idea that the vaccine is going to be malevolent is like axiomatic. Of course it's going to be malevolent. Of course it is. Why would they go through all of this trouble and then just stick you with a needle? Of course, they don't stick the fancy people with needles. They just pretend to. You saw Kamala Harris's vaccination, which was an obvious fraud last week. But anyway, so this is great. We're developing the information revolution, and it's protecting us right off the bat. It has a great beneficial effect because, a lot of people are just saying, we're just going to stick it out. And the good news here is that they can't threaten a lot of these people with losing their jobs because they're out of work.
Yeah, well, when you put in a position where they've nothing left to lose, they're going to lose it. They're not going to tolerate it, and that's the big. That's why people suffer a long chain of abuses, because it's their day-to-day lives. They have to get through it. It isn't worth it to them to rebel until it gets to the point where it is for them to rebel, or you not comply. It's not even you don't even have to have direct rebellion, just non-compliance, and I suspect you're getting a lot of that anyway. You're just not being reported. I'm hearing reports out of California where people just aren't, like in San Diego, people just they're opening up their business, they're not complying, sheriffs aren't enforcing this stuff, and it does. You hope to see a point where there's a sort of a general acknowledgement among the public of a sort of a lack of legitimacy among the so-called authorities, and from that maybe you can build a political coalition to do something directly. It's I just heard that there's a bill submitted in New York to incarcerate or segregate diseased individuals. Then you say, what's a diseased individual? Is it a positive PCR test that's fraudulent? You hear, it's like, what's your standard?
Die globale Kondomproduktion ist wieder angelaufen. Aufgrund von Corona hat man sie erstmal gestoppt, weil kein Bedarf zum Shakern bestand. Aber jetzt läuft sie global wieder an, was ja im Endeffekt bedeutet, die Welt geht wieder los und poppt rum. CR-Code am Krankenwagen soll Gaffer abschrecken. Alles klar. Muss Rap hart sein, um gut zu klingen? Nein, Rap kann zart sein. Alter Schwede. Oh, ein britisches Girl wurde in Syrien, also nach Syrien verschleppt, wurde dann dort 12-mal am Tag von der ISIS geraped, was dann dazu führte, dass es jetzt ein Skandal ist, wie das letzte Kind aus London, was verschwand und irgendwo in Thailand auftauchte. Oh, Marilyn Manson ist auch mit Sex-Traffic. Cool. Ein Nazi und Sex-Traffic. Das wird immer besser. Da hat der Biden Nummer 6 Trillion, das müssten ein Billion sein, am 100. Tag rausgehauen. Und jetzt ist das auch durch, oder? Rudy Giuliani hatte eine Hausdurchsuchung. Bei dieser Hausdurchsuchung wurde eine Festplatte mitgenommen. Auf dieser Festplatte lag dummerweise Beweismaterial gegen Hunter Biden. Jetzt ist es Teil einer Investigation. Sehr spannend. Sieh da, die Wiener machen ab Montag wieder auf. Montag wäre dann der 3. Passt perfekt. Während die Deutschen am 3. geimpft werden in Berlin und wir dann theoretisch ab 4. oder 5. Gut, 40 Tonnen toter Fisch, das ist langweilig. Wutaustritt, langweilig. Haftbefehl trotz Porträt, langweilig. Gesunkenes indonesisches Schiff ist langweilig. Kaffeesatz nicht wegwerfen, natürlich. Disneyland reopen. Mensch, du. Sachen gibt's, oder? Sensationell. Erotik. Oh Gott, was ist denn das Wort?
Welcome to another episode of our.
And they banned labor unions. And I mentioned the fact that, there were tons of Russia was never a capitalist country. You had, the Labor Brotherhood of the Holy Cross, you had all the artels, you had the peasant communes, you had monastic labor brotherhoods all over the place. These were real functional socialist institutions. And, these were all destroyed. It was one of the first things they did when
So, Stanford-Studenten-Government-Kandidat sagt, wir müssen die weißen Menschen ausrotten. Weiße Menschen ausrotten. Das Übliche.
Tito took power in Yugoslavia. If there's ever a good communist, Tito comes the closest. Because he wasn't nearly as tyrannical as the rest of them were. He had prison camps and everything, but it was never anything like the USSR or North Korea. And when he actually created worker control over industry, which he was the model for, he's threatened with invasion. The church was always despised capitalism. But so the second thing was the notion of worker or proletarian or any labor-related term isn't what we think, because they called Jacob Schiff a proletarian, but some poor priest from Ukraine was a capitalist exploiter. So these terms never meant what we thought, and yet even historians on our side, take them at their word. They never mean that. They simply mean a worker is someone who supported the party. Period. That's what a proletarian was. It had nothing to do with their position in society, whether they were wealthy or not, because the Jewish founders of the Communist Party all come from middle or upper middle class backgrounds. So terms like worker and everything, this has to do with supporting the party, and it didn't matter how rich you were. The third thing is that Trotsky, Lenin, and Stalin were identical. They didn't differ on anything. The only reason that they had any differential had to do with the Jewish question. Now, Stalin was not an anti-Semite. Stalin never disliked the Jews. When he purged the party, of course, they were all Jews to begin with. So it was really hard to avoid purging pretty much nothing but Jews when a party was at the elite levels, nothing but Jewish. Essentially, the American left had a problem. They either could admit that the party was completely Jewish in its early years and accept Stalin, or they could turn Stalin into this fascist. And they chose the latter option. The old Bolsheviks were heavily Jewish, but even in Solzhenitsyn's 200 Years Together, he says it's all phony. Stalin was never anti-Jewish. The death penalty was still on the books for any anti-Semitism in the country. The next concept is that nationalism was always banned in the USSR. Stalin was never a nationalist. These are wild exaggerations. Russian nationalism was banned by the USSR. Anything having to do with that was banned, even during the war. And then, of course, the next thing is that the West was never anti-Bolshevik. The West they never had sanctions on the USSR. There was one brief period of time, I should say, after the invasion of Afghanistan. But it was very brief. But you had Jimmy Carter getting on TV saying, we're going to stop, high-level trade and whether it be steel or computers, everything else, suggesting that they were trading with them to begin with on that stuff. There were sanctions on Francisco Franco, and of course there are sanctions on Putin, but there were none on Stalin, there were none on Khrushchev, there were none on Andropov or any of these people. So there was a brisk trade. The Soviet economy, right up till Stalin, and even afterwards, their whole computer industry was built by the big computer firms in the 1970s. Henry Ford built the largest truck plant in the world just outside of Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine. So I guess his anti-communism went out the window when he saw profits to be made, and the Ford was the model for all the Soviet cars after that. They didn't fear the USSR, they built the USSR. The electric grid was laid down by GE. The Gulag system was laid down by by private prison contractors. I mean, this
ist so krass. Das Gulag war von Private Prison Contracts, ne? Private Sicherheitsfirmen. Alle PCs by the West und die Traktoren aus der USA von Ford.
But there were none on Stalin, there were none on Khrushchev, there were none on Andropov or any of these people. So there was a brisk trade. The Soviet economy, right up till Stalin, and even afterwards, I mean, their whole computer industry was built by the big computer firms in the 1970s. Henry Ford built the largest truck plant in the world just outside of Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine. So I guess his anti-communism went out the window when he saw this to be made, and the Ford was the model for all the Soviet cars after that. You know, they didn't fear the USSR, they built the USSR. The electric grid was laid down by GE. The Gulag system was laid down by private prison contractors. I mean, this all comes from the West. The gold mining came from a big Alaskan company. They were never anti-USSR. They were heavily invested in it. So you have this love for the American military today, but the hatred for it during the Korean and Vietnam War, because, you know, the U.S. is allegedly fighting communism on the one hand, but then trading and giving aid and assistance to the USSR on the other hand. And of course, the USSR was supporting these, you know, North Korea and North Vietnam. So the whole thing is completely phony. You know, if there's one myth out there, it's the Cold War. And the negative Soviet rhetoric came around whenever the Soviet Union threatened to get too big. And it got too big when China fell in 49. And now they start worrying, well, they could have their own economy and cut us out of it. Because even then, they were still trading in dollars. The trade before the Sino-Soviet split of 61, they were trading in dollars. There was never any, you know, a lot of that was rhetoric, trying to find an enemy after World War II. And, you know, that was simple rhetoric, because they were, if they were against the Soviet Union, they'd cut off all trade with them. And yet every major area of industry was built by Western, especially American companies, including during the Depression. Stalin, I forget which Congress it was, actually said, we're worried that because of the heavy Western investment in our country, that we're losing our independence. And that's how intense, when they were bringing over Western workers, there were all of these.
So, Wahlmaschine already to hand over back to the countries. Wir haben es 13 Uhr. Ich würde sagen, der Spaß beginnt. Ich ziehe mich jetzt splitternackt aus und warte drauf. Natürlich nicht. Das ist ja Schwachsinn. Was ist denn hier los?